Hey everybody, it's EJ from eyedesyn.com, and today we are going to be creating some colorful topography, some 3D topography that you can see here in my viewport, and just went away in my render. There we go. So right there, we're going to be showing you how you can quickly create this like nice 3D topographical effect, and how to make it all fun and colorful. So let's just dig in here and create a new composition. So we're gonna create our not typography, our topography, topographic map by creating a landscape object. Now, a lot of how your topographical map is going to look is going to be based on how you build your landscape objects. So depending on how high it is, how big the scale is, like how many little accent bits are you going to have here, also like how rough, so you can like smooth things out here by getting rid of the rough furrows, and the fine furrows too. You can smooth all that out, and I think that's actually what we're going to want to do. And let's bring down the segments a little bit too, maybe 30 and 30, just so we have nice smooth kind of bits. Maybe 35, 35, that should be good. And then we can also, if we don't like this, we can also change the seed and kind of play around with the seed and see what looks good there. Kind of see what that looks like. So just, you know, this is really what's gonna make the difference between a lot of this stuff. So I think I like this. I like that it has multiple peaks here. We can maybe even raise this up to say 300. Sure, 300 sounds good. And what I'm gonna do is just make a copy of it and make it editable, just so in case I need to go back if I screw anything up, which I've been known to do on occasion. So what we're gonna do is cut this up into little slices, and the way we're going to do that is by going into either the front or right view so we can see this straight on, and we're going to go and get our knife tool. So it's going to be MK, so you can see K is the knife tool. I'm going to get in the knife tool mode, and it's going to be grayed out until we get into polygon mode. And then we can go and switch this from lines. We don't want to do a line, we want to do a plane cut. So what this is going to do, if I drag my cursor here, you can see that it's basically cutting it using a plane in 3D space. You can see this even more dramatically if I go into one of my side views here. You can see that it's just like a 3D plane that's going to be cutting into my landscape. But right now it's at a horizontal. I actually need to cut vertically. So what I'm going to do is change the plane from XY to YX, and I'll get my horizontal cut that I need. So now what we can do is adjust the amount of cuts we have, and we can also adjust the spacing. But actually what I want to do is just create an even number of cuts, and just be able to define how many cuts I want, and they're going to be spaced evenly from the top of my geometry to the bottom. And we can do this by enabling the slice option. And if I turn this on, let's restrict to selection off. There we go. That was my issue. So select, deselect restrict to selection, and you can see that this just creates a 9 cuts evenly spaced from the top to the bottom of our geometry. So we can go in here and crank this up as much as we want, and we can see how many cuts we got. So maybe 30, 31, see what that looks like. Let's just do 30, and I think that looks good. Now the key here is before I make any cuts, I need to go ahead and enable this select cuts option. And what that's going to do is when I cut this, it's going to make my cuts, and if I go to edge mode, it's going to have all of my cuts selected. So now what I can do with all my cuts selected, or my edges selected, is I can go to Mesh, Commands, and choose Edge to Spline. So it's going to change all of those selected edges and turn them into splines. Now if I go into my landscape object and twirl it down, it's going to make a spline that's a child of my landscape. I can turn off my landscape and you'll see that we have this really cool topographical outline just comprised of splines. And right now it's set to linear, so I can smooth all this out by choosing a different type and choosing like adaptive and smooth everything out. We can choose maybe like a uniform and decrease the values there even more, but I think adaptive is going to be just fine for what we need. And we can also change it to different types and see which is the smoothest, but I think B-spline is going to be the best kind of amount of smoothing here. So now that we have our topographical map, one thing that could be fun, and this is a whole nother different workflow, but you can also use these splines and render them just by applying like a hair render tag, and you can just you can see that we have some hair that is now allowing for our splines to be rendered in our viewport, and we can go and create a new hair material here and go ahead and say let's just make this like a hot pink or something like that, something that really pops, and then just copy that, make this the backlit color as well, and go and apply that. You see we have this really cool spline, and we can also go in here and just make the thickness from the root and the tip the same, so we can have a solid line. So you can have a lot of fun with some cool, maybe, you know, UI elements or something like that with this kind of thing, and kind of rotate around or scale it up and down, kind of like this. So that could be a cool little alternative kind of thing. But we're gonna do something completely different. And what I'm gonna do is break this one whole entire spline. So right now it's one entire spline. We need to break these into individual splines so we can extrude each one. So what I'm going to do is go and select my landscape spline, go to mesh, go to spline, and I'm going to go explode segments. We're going to explode the crap out of all of our segments, and when I do that and I twirl down my main spline here, it's going to break all of my splines into individual spline objects here. So this is perfect. This is exactly what we need. So I'm going to select all of my splines. We got 50 of them, and I'm going to go and create an extrude, drag all of my splines into my extrude. And the one thing is that the spline that was originally there that made all of these children's splines is just empty now, so I can delete that original spline because it's just empty. I can go up to my extrude, and right now it's extruding in the wrong direction, so I don't need to extrude in the Z, I need to extrude up in the Y. And you'll notice that when I extrude up, there's no cap. And the reason for this is because if I select all of my splines, like so, you'll see that my splines are not closed. So once I close the splines, you'll see that I have one extrude, and then if I just go ahead and turn on hierarchical, now I'll have all of my splines extruded there. So looking good. So now what I could do is go in here, do some fillet caps, so this has some nice rounding, so maybe a 0.5, just a small fillet cap. That's looking nice. And now we can start texturing this. So the way I'm going to texture this, let me just rename this to Topo. I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to create a really nice colorful gradient to color this. And the first thing I'm going to do is go into interactive render region here. And going to need to see my side view here as well. And what I'm going to do is color this via a gradient. So I'll rename this gradient. And go in here and just create a gradient. And you're going to notice that no matter if I choose 2DU or 2DV, it's really not what we want. You can see that the gradient from top to bottom is not happening the way we would think it would. So the thing we have to do to fix this is to go and use 3D linear. Now what 3D linear is going to do is create a gradient based on the a gradient in 3D space. So how you can define where your gradient starts and ends is by the start and end field, and what these values are is x, y, and z, and then end x, y, and z. So right now, if I get out of my interactive render region here, this is x going left and right. You can see that our gradient starts at -100. So you can see right here is where the black part of our gradient begins. And then it's going to end at +100. So you can see that exactly, that's what's going on. We can actually turn off cycle because we don't need to kind of cycle that at all. And you can see that it goes from left to right. And just totally goes solid black, and it doesn't repeat that gradient. So this is actually wrong. We need to not have our gradient in the x, but we need to have it in the y. So we can go ahead and do the same thing and just zero out the x coordinates, and you can see that our gradient's going to start at -100 and end at +100 in the y. And you can see right here, each of these grid spots are 100. So our actual geometry, our landscape geometry, actually goes from a little over 100, say like 125, and really starts at maybe -135. So it's like right here. So this is 200, -200. This is about -135 or so. So you can see when I do that, we have a full gradient from top to bottom now, kind of taking over that whole entire the height of our landscape object. So now all I have to do is just create some fun colors here. So we can start at black. We can go in here and choose like a dark purple, like so. Then we can go and change it to like a bright blue color, and then this goes into like a teal color, and then this can go into like this kind of green color, and then it can end at like a lime, like bright lime green. So we can kind of adjust these knots the way we want to, or if we right click right here, we can do distribute knots, and that will evenly space all of our knots along the whole entire gradient. But actually, I kind of want to limit the darker values and have more of these brighter values here. Maybe make another bright blue or baby blue kind of thing here. Have more control over this gradient. So maybe something like that, and then we need, looks like we need to actually adjust our green because we're not getting, we're not getting some of our very top lime green here, so I just need to adjust the end of my gradient. Something like that. Let's actually get some like pinkish purple down here, maybe here. That's a little bit too bright. A little bit too bright. So just messing around with the gradients. I think that's looking pretty good. So we just kind of want to fade this into black. So that's looking good. And making sure that our gradient goes all the way to the top, and that looks good. And what we can do is copy this gradient and place it in our luminance and paste. And actually what we can do is if we decide we need to edit this gradient, we don't want to be in a situation where we change this and then we have to copy and then paste this back in here to update with the changes. So what we can do, just in case in the future we want to change our gradient, what we can do is right click on texture. We're going to go to set driver. So this texture is going to drive something else. And we actually want to drive this texture in our luminance. So we'll go to expression, we'll right click on texture again, we'll go to set driven relative, and then what that will do is if I adjust anything here, so I moved my blue and my purple, or like light violet, in my color, and you'll see that that updated here as well because we linked them with an expression. You can see that by doing the set driver set driven, this created a little expression, so you can see it linked the gradient texture to the gradient texture in the luminance channel. So that's the color channel, that's the luminance channel. So the color channel is driving the luminance texture. So we can then go ahead and just kind of readjust that back to how it was. And again, that's going to update in this 3D gradient as well. And we can go into interactive render region. That's looking pretty good. Let's go and add, we don't need the hair renderer anymore. That was added when I added that hair render tag. So we can go in here, add some ambient occlusion, get some nice shading in there. We can go and we can grab our HDRI Studio and we'll turn off let's turn off the floor and the background. Actually, we can keep the background on, I guess. We'll just make this kind of dark, like a dark gradient, something like that. Just going to have a little bit of maybe dark purple, just a little subtle thing. Maybe a little, might be a little too subtle, can't even tell. That's looking good. And now we can add, let's add a light. So we'll add an area light and just kind of move this over here maybe. And we'll add some area shadows to that. And we'll just kind of decrease the quality here, just so it renders a little bit faster. Let's add some fall offs. We'll do inverse square. See what that looks like. Right now the light's a little hot, so I'll turn down the intensity to say 85. And we can go, now we can go in here, and since we have our HDRI Studio rig, we actually have like an HDR image that we can then reflect. So we can go in here, we can mess with the specular, can make this like a sharper specular, so we get some really nice highlights along our fillet cap edges or little bevels there. Can maybe turn down the luminance there. I think that might be a little bit too bright and kind of contributing to the fact that we're getting kind of like a blown out image here. And that looks a little bit better. So say 75 should be good. Let's go back into our reflectance. Let's add some Beckman reflection, and that's really bright. Let's go to additive. Let's turn down the reflection strength. We don't need any specular. Let's add like a tiny bit of roughness, like so. And maybe let's just do like 10 and 10 and see what that looks like. So let's add a little bit more reflection. Maybe 10 and maybe 15 and 20. Just a nice little sheen. And maybe have this have a little bluish color to it too. I think that's looking good. Maybe add some Fresnel. Go and create a plexiglass and maybe bring that down just slightly. So we still have a sheen, just not as overbearing as it was. Let's do 85. All right. So now we can actually go and let's turn on physical renderer. So we get some nicer look, some nice grain in here. Go into our physical. What I like to do is just do like 4, 2, 4 for sampling, subdivision, shading, and then the minimum and maximum, just because I find for me it's like a nice little sweet spot, and then you can just kind of work off of these values and see what you can get away with. So I think that's looking good. Maybe do 3, 3, and then probably go 3 to the blurriness subdivisions because we have the blurry reflections. And then we have ambient occlusion, which we might want to crank up there too, as well as the shadow, our area shadows. So let me bring this in the smaller window just so it'll calculate faster. Hit render. Just want to see what this looks like. I think what I might want to do is bring up my gradient so this little middle part is a little darker. So let's do that. Let's go in here. And again, we have our gradients linked in the color and luminance, so I can just go in here and change it here. And we should be okay. So maybe something like that. Make this just a little bit darker. I think that's a little bit too hot. I think that's what I didn't like there. So yeah, those match. Cool. Just adjust all this. Okay, I think I'm liking that. I'm liking that a little bit better. Get some of those darker values coming up. Alright, now let's see what that looks like. Render. Alright, yeah, I'm liking that a lot better. We have some of the darker gradient in that center there. Whoop, just accidentally stopped the render there. So then we have a nice contrast as the elevation gets higher, and then we have that like lime green happening. And I think actually what I want to do is make it so the lime green hits that the smaller part right here. That smaller peak, so I'll just move the gradient down just so we can start to see some of that lime green at the top of that peak, because that'll help add some nice contrast to this scene. Let's see what that looks like. Cool, I'm liking that a lot better. Got that nice contrast. We got that hot teal values up here. Probably do with even bringing this down a little bit more. There, now we're getting a little bit more of that teal down there. Cool, I'm liking that. So let's just go ahead, and I think the one thing I want to do before I render is to make that HDR Studio, maybe make that a little bit brighter, maybe add a little bit of fill light, some ambient fill, just a tiny bit. Maybe bring down our main light just a tiny bit as well. Make this more of a sharp angle. Let's add a camera. Make sure I'm in my perspective view. Whoops, what'd I do? Let's so what I did, you always want to create a camera with the right view selected or it'll screw up. So there we go, we got our perspective. Let's look through it. Let's change our focal length 35 and sensor film gate to 50. So we have a little bit of perspective. We can actually add more depth to to our scene going like that, and just kind of pick a nice camera view here. Let's go and change this to 1280, 720, and maybe something like this. Maybe that view. And let's just make this part of the gradient a little less dark, just so we can try to make that out. And let's render this now. All right, I'm liking that. I think what I ended up doing is I made the HDRI rig too bright, so you can start to see that reflection on the edges here. And what I'd really like to do is just have this kind of look like it fades off. So let's go back into our reflection, and we'll just change the Fresnel and just crank that up and see if that helps. So you can see that we're kind of getting these edges over here fading back. Liking that a lot better, and maybe make this specular a little more sharp. There we go. Now we're getting that kind of faded edges there, which is what I was going for. Yeah, just by adding that sharper specular kind of helps that. Can make this maybe a bluish green specular. And I think we're good. I'm going to save this really quick. Colorful Topo 2. And let's just render out a still. So we got, let's do sync. Actually, let's do animation. That's all good. Let's render. Let's go into our ambient occlusion. Let's maybe make the distance a little shorter and render. So now what we can do is, what I like to do when this renders is I like to go into my filter and just kind of mess around with color grading as this is rendering, just because then you kind of get a good idea for how this could look when you bring it into After Effects. And kind of grade in there. So this is just like your levels. You can darken everything, do like a little S-curve kind of thing, see what that looks like. You can go into your red, kind of pump up the reds there so that's a little bit more of a brighter violet. So this is just something fun I like to do, just because, I mean, you're just waiting for a dang render. Might as well like try to see what your color grading could look like when you start messing around with this stuff. Like that. Let's see what we can do if we pump up some of the blues. So that looked kind of cool. Let's pump up the blues there. I think I'm liking that. So then what you can do is, if you decide, if this is just a still and you're just rendering out a still, and you want to have all the filter stuff kind of retained, what you can do is go into your history, right click on that render, go save as, and pick what format you want, depth, and then we're going to do save filter, and that's going to save that color correction filter that you did. And just do something like that, just save, and you'll save out your image, your PNG or whatever format image, with that color grading that you enabled with that filter. So that's just kind of like a cool handy tip there. So I'm liking that. You can change, you can go in here and change the composition again and have fun with it. Again, this is totally dependent on your original landscape object. So when you actually go ahead and do this and recreate this using this workflow, yours can look completely different because of the fact that every landscape is going to be probably dramatically different. So the one thing that you want to remember to do, and I actually forgot to do this until now, is if I turn off the extrude, you'll see that we have this kind of valley or this little dip in here, and you're not seeing that anymore because of the extrude covering it up. So to fix that, what you're going to want to do, I'm going to turn off the extrude, and you're going to need to manually go into your side view, and right now I have, that's not one of them, but if I select like these two or some of these other splines here, you'll see that I'm selecting multiple splines. If I move this out, you'll see that I need to actually connect these, so we're not extruding these separately. So you'll need to go in here, and I'll select both these splines and go to connect objects and delete, and you'll need to do this manually for each of them. And right now I keep selecting my light in my camera, so I'll connect and delete those. Let's go into my side view here. I think I connected and deleted those. Yep. So this one, connect and delete. This one, looks like there's not two splines on that line. There's two on this one though, so I'll connect and delete. And this one as well, connect and delete. Then let's see if there's any on that bottom. Yep, because there's two splines. So you can see we got two splines selected. Connect and delete, and let's see. That hopefully should be it. So I'm just going through and making sure. It's okay if the upper ones that don't have any gaps are not connected. I'm just worried about the ones that create little indentations. So looks like I missed this one, so I'll deselect camera and light, connect objects and delete, and hopefully that should be it. So it's just these bottom ones. So let's turn back on our object, and it looks like I missed one of them towards the bottom, because I think my hole goes deeper than that. So let's just double check here. So there's three elements. Maybe I did get them all. Let's see. Going through each of these. So this is the only kind of pain in the butt here. And it looks like this one, this spline right here, looks like I have 3 splines that are on that layer. So let's see what that is. So it's this tiny one over here and this one. So let's just connect. You can see there's this tiny little island right there. So we'll connect all those, connect objects and delete. Now, alright, now we have all of them. And you can see that this actually goes all the way to the bottom. So now we have a really nice setup, because now we have the topographical map going into this little valley as well. So yeah, so today we learned how we can use a landscape object, how to use the knife tool to kind of cut our landscape object into a bunch of different segments and planes so that we can build a 3D topographical map. And we also then extruded those edges. We turned those edges into splines. We extruded those splines. We then went in and made a 3D linear gradient and added some really cool, funky lighting texture, colorful textures to our topographical map based on the height of each of our little segments. And then we used some filter tools to kind of mess around and do some color grading while we wait for our render to finish. So that's going to be it for me. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments section. And if you create anything with this topographical map kind of workflow, let me see it. Because like I said, depending on what your original landscape object looked like, yours can look completely different from mine. So I'd love to see what you guys come up with and your gradients or whatever you come up with. But yeah, that's it. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.